This, you know, I realized that the inspiration for this is part of the piece that I had in the magazine. The inspiration for this, partly, was this guy that I used to know named Kim Connell. I didn't remember his last name, but he actually was published in the original magazine and has passed away since. But anyway, so this is for him. There has always been a market at 149 where the Harlem River meets the east at the bottom of the Bronx Peninsula. By November 1975, the terminal had seen better days. But when the sun went down, a man or woman in some sort of trouble could get whatever they wanted to salve their wounds. Near the river shore, under the moon, was an old Cadillac, a Coupe de Ville, with shot-out tires, a big yawning mouth, where the front end had been taken off and sold. The scrap metal plant was right across the bridge and ran all night. A tutor turned me on. I didn't think it was a good idea, but those were wild days, you know. You never think you're going to get strung out. It was the day the vet club occupied the Board of Higher Education. The tutor was one of the PR activists, that's Puerto Rican, a veteran, cool guy, a little crazy, touched by the war. You felt a little scared of him, sorry for him, and fascinated all at the same time. I had done dope once before after a poetry reading downtown. For some reason it didn't stick. Maybe it had something to do with me and Nancy breaking up. What haunted me was out our tenement window in Harlem by the yellow light of one of those bulbs in a cage with someone's white shirts and underwear hanging on a line across the way all night. My wife out there on the fire escape when I looked, giving a back rub to the brother of one of her co-workers. I knew it was only a matter of time. The best idea I had was to get a double dime bag of dope and share it with one of the kind ladies of the broken Cadillac out by the water. Some of the guys told them exactly how to do it, but I figured a girl like that knows her business. It took longer because of the dope, but if you shared, the girls didn't mind. The cracked windshield fogged up, so when the cop beeped his siren, it startled me. They waited till we finished. When I got out, the one at the driver's side said, "Where do you think you're going, Buster?" I was thinking about walking over the bridge to Harlem and going home. How about getting in and taking a ride? They didn't cuff me or anything. We drove east, back into the Bronx on 149. The cop driving looked like an eagle with this great reddened beak of a nose. He sniffed, coughed, drinking what smelled like gin and lemon soda from a wax paper cup, long sweated of any firmness. His partner looked rookie cop, ex-high school linebacker type. He didn't meet my eyes. He occupied himself with the radio, ignored his partner's admonitions to me, clearly pretending that the dirty policeman fumes his partner was perspiring out of every pore didn't stink into his narrative. The lights were on at Yankee Stadium to the north, like a great spaceship about to take off, like a separate society of reality. The driver looked at the mirror when he spoke to me. He said, "There's going to be a deli on the corner. You go in, I'll beep the lights, and they will hand you a paper bag. If you run or try to, I will drive up on the sidewalk and run you over." Up on Cortlandt, next to a bike shop, he pulls up real slow, and I get out with him coming to a complete stop. The partner was answering a call for a domestic disturbance in the projects. You could see them looming up behind the bodega, the Melrose houses. The guy behind the counter was white. He looked like he could have been a cop, but something about him was off. He didn't have the right haircut, for one thing. The cop outside burped on the lights. The not-a-cop fellow spit into a paper cup and reached under the counter. There was an old woman in rags reaching for some bread on a counter, and she turned at the sound, saw me, and sniffed. She looked at me, and she knew in an instant that I was compromised, doing the bidding of some madman, also laden with the recriminations of a forgiving Lord, yet in her smile and her slight crinkling of her eyes, there was mercy and understanding beyond all measure, absolving my sins. The hookers, the dealer who had sold me the dope, even the cop, even those of my wife. I took the bag from the counterman. He knew too, and stumbled out the door and got back into the car. I tapped the passenger cop's shoulder, but he did not turn. The driver grabbed the bag. He pulled away with one hand on the wheel and one on the paper bag. He gunned it. The old Plymouth engine grabbed as we climbed the incline. At the top of the hill, the fellow crossing the street started to run. The driver swerved and hit him in full stride up on the curb against one of those tall metal things that were used to call a cop or a fire engine in the old days. The guy crumpled and slid down to the sidewalk. The passenger cop made a choking sound. The driver got out and the guy on the ground jumped him. He could have been dead, but he wasn't. That's a New York City thing. Blood and guts notwithstanding, you never know someone's dead until they stop fighting. They struggled, but the cop fought him off with his pistol, got back in the undercover vice cruiser, lurched into reverse, bounced back down the curb, turned the wheel, and hit him again. There was an awful sound, and we drove away with no lights. The driver pulled to a stop like it was nothing in front of the projects. His partner got out, looked around, sighed like he just decided the weight of the world, then ran into the houses with his radio fumbling with the snap over his .38. The driver cop got out slowly after opening up the glove compartment and putting the paper bag inside. He still had it in his hand. He thought better of it, took it out, and stuffed it under the front seat. He never looked back at me. He looked over the bumper in the light from the outside of the houses. He wiped it off with his forearm sleeve, then walked in past the usual suspects. I left the brown bag. The world of sin is too small. It was the next day at school at a rally on the Grand Concourse when I heard some students talking that I realized I had been in the car that ran over the mule's brother, but did not kill him. And there were things that I knew that I was better off not talking about, where matters of life and death could be decided by luck and circumstance on the whim of a reprobate. Another mother's son gone wrong, jacked up on gin and soda in the middle of the night in a land where right and wrong are either side of a coin left spinning on the sidewalk. It landed tails. When I got arrested a couple of weeks later in a protest at Ostos, I was looking over my shoulder at all the cops. But that night, I walked from the Melrose Projects back to the man on the sidewalk. He was lying there. A terrible sound came from him. He was trying to breathe. A couple of his back ribs were stuck through the skin of his back. I went to a payphone, found a quarter in my back pocket, and dialed 911. They asked if I wanted to leave my name, and I told them no. Are you on the scene? I'd rather not say. Sir, will anyone be there to meet the ambulance? I don't know. Can you repeat the address? I obeyed, dropped the phone, and walked toward the man. It was hard to get that close because of the sound he made. There was a shoe store with the gate pulled down. I leaned against the gate and lit a cigarette. There was no one else on the street. It was going on 1 o'clock. When the ambulance workers pulled up, I ran out and flagged them down, pointed to the poor fellow, to Juan Colon, the mule's brother. I retreated to the grate and lit another cigarette. After a minute, I started walking. Thanks.